Boy, it's great to be here. Our topic is harnessing the power of human ingenuity. And as you heard, it's got three colors representing three disciplines. Ingenuity, of course, is human cleverness. It's problem solving, it's innovation, it's creativity. But what do you do with it? That's what we want to talk about today. What to do with it. And the model has red, green, and blue, the same three colors in your television set. Your high-def TV has multiple colors, and it builds a full-color image. And in the center, there's a sweet spot where the equal intensity of all three disciplines come together. We have white light. Now, today, we're going to use blue to represent process, and we're going to use red to represent people. Now, you all know, an organization, you want a great organization, you need two things. You need great people, and you need good processes and procedures, right? So what's the problem? Why are we here? We should just go home. Well, here's the problem. That was a good model for the 20th century. You see, back in the mid-20th century, a company lasted on the Standard & Poor List 500 about 61 years on average, longer than a normal career. You know what it is today? A guess? Throw me a number. 18 years. Shorter than the normal career. Things are changing fast. And if we don't keep up, if we don't use our own ingenuity, our companies, our careers, everything just goes haywire. And that's the third element we're talking about today. It's the green. And that's where the white light comes from, with process, people, and ingenuity. Now, I got to give a legal disclaimer. You heard I work for Great West Financial. Our legal department said either I have to let them review the speech in advance, or I had to have a disclaimer that they had nothing to do with it, and I'm talking for myself. That's what I'm doing. But I didn't work alone, and all great things require collaboration. Great collaborators that work with me, Bill Keene and Larry Nelson, co-authored the book Colorful Leadership. And my most recent paper with Dr. James Reardon, professor of management, particularly management history, helped me a lot with the historical precedents that we'll be talking about today. So great collaboration with others. Interesting book was put out by Jim Clifton, who is chairman of the Gallup organization, is chairman of Gallup, The Coming Jobs War. And in some ways, it's not a real fun book because he points out some problems. You know, jobs are going away. I have a friend that I had lunch with just a couple weeks ago, and his job's in the process of being outsourced to India. And to add insult to injury, he actually had to train his replacement. She flew from India to come here, and he had to train her. You know, we're all looking at that. We've got to do something. Now, Clifton looked at history. He said, has this ever happened before? So he looks at what is the core problem and what do we do about it? He said the core problem today is there are not enough good jobs for people to work hard and get ahead. You know, the politicians can talk about income inequality. We can have Occupy Wall Street. But the core problem is people want to work. And they want to work hard and they're going to get good money. Now, Clifton looked at history, and he said a generation ago, he was watching TV, and some economists, this is the late 70s, said our real problem is Japan and Germany. They rose out of the ashes of World War II, and now they have better quality, lower prices, better productivity, better efficiency, and they're putting us out of business. That's a real problem. But you know, that's not what happened. According to Clifton, our economy in the United States grew at 5 times the rate forecast by the best economists. How did that happen? Clifton would say it was human ingenuity. These guys, you recognize them? Did you know that, according to the Denver Post in February, the largest companies in market capitalization, the 4 largest they listed, were Apple, Google, Exxon, and Microsoft. 3 out of 4 are new economy that didn't exist a generation ago. And that's how much our world has changed. Now, do you know who the bottom guys is? Does anybody know the guy on the bottom? Dan Bricklin. Anybody know what Dan did? Anybody? Shout it out. VisiCalc. Yes. Before Dan Bricklin worked on his MBA at Harvard University, he had been a software engineer. And he said, this is painful working with paper and pencil and adding machines. You can't do financial in it. Do we have any accountants out here that are old enough to remember that? Pre-VisiCalc? It's terrible. And he invented it. And the reason companies bought PCs, both Apple and Microsoft and IBM, all that, in the early 80s was to run VisiCalc. It was the reason. Now, he and thousands of other software developers did things, but what's most interesting about Dan Bricklin, he couldn't patent the electronic spreadsheet. Why? Because in the 1970s, the product of your mind was not patentable, only the product of your hands. That changed in the 80s. So here's the guy that invented the spreadsheet you all use. It went from VisiCalc to Lotus to Excel, but the core invention he owned. And actually, Bricklin, I've seen quoted saying it was a good thing he didn't patent it because Lotus was better than VisiCalc and Excel was better than Lotus, and you always want the best. And sometimes patents get in the way. So we're going to start with Ingenuity, the green in my model. You notice there's a butterfly. You've all heard of the butterfly effect. That the initial starting conditions, small changes in initial starting conditions, big changes in outcome. We can't predict the future. It came from Edward Lorenz. He's known as the father of chaos theory. He wrote a paper, Predictability. Does the flap of a butterfly's wing in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? Well, obviously not, but the story behind this, when he discovered the butterfly, was in 1961. He and a group of meteorologists were working on computers. Computers were new in 1961, and they got their hands on it and said, we can change the world. We can predict the weather for the first time. We got these really cool models. They're complicated, and they work well. And what he wanted to do is move the projections out. So one day, they didn't have monitors and jump drives. They had printouts with numbers on paper, if you can imagine that. But one day, he wanted to extend a forecast, so he keyed in the numbers into the computer, ran it, went and got some coffee, and when he came back, the first few days, the weather was the same, but 30 days out, it was completely different. At first, he said he thought that there must be a vacuum tube broken in his computer. Remember vacuum tubes in computers? They did exist. And then he realized, wait a minute, the printout is accurate to 3 decimal points. The computer memory was to 6 decimal points. A difference of less than 1/1000th of a degree in his model changed the outcome dramatically 30 days out. He knew we would never predict the weather 30 days out. Here we are 50 years later, we still can't. And he was right. He spent the rest of his life, he died just a few years ago, looking at nonlinear equations and at problems that can't be solved. And that's what chaos theory is about and complexity is about. Where's the order in chaos? Well, it's always there. We got to find it. Order emerges from chaos. That's chaos theory. What conditions make order emerge from chaos? Now, I like to look at history, so let's go back 2,500 years. Anybody know about the Athens? What came out of Athens? Democracy, philosophy, scientific method, Western thinking, all sorts of things. Where did this human ingenuity come from in this small city on the Mediterranean? I shot this picture just 3 years ago. It's just awe-inspiring. But you know, these guys didn't walk up there. That's just temples. This is where the ideas came from, the city. This is the city just a few years ago, and it hasn't changed much. The Acropolis is on the hill. The people are in the city. And you see, they had an unusual quantity of highly intelligent, interesting people in a political condition, an economic condition where they could think and write and do cool things. That was 2,500 years ago. It changed the world, didn't it? We are Western thinkers because of Aristotle. Okay, there have been other times and places in history. I'm not going to list them all, but one big one, recognize this guy, William Shakespeare? Some people say he couldn't have written the work of Shakespeare. It was too good. It must have been somebody else. Well, the fact is, he lived in Elizabethan London when plays were valued, when there was no copyright, so you could steal from one another liberally, and every iteration got better. It was because he lived in London in Elizabethan times where there are other great writers that he could rise above that and do some of the greatest literature in English history, in our language. So there's a modern-day Athens, a modern-day London. You know where it is? Well, it could be Boulder, Colorado. There's a lot of smart people. It could be Galvanize here in Denver, right? But the big place where all the smart people want to go is Silicon Valley. You recognize this lady, Marissa? You know, she was at Google. She gave us the Google interface that we all love. And she was hired by Yahoo. Let's Googleize Yahoo and get somewhere. And what is she famous for a year ago? Do you remember when she hit the news? Yeah, I heard it. Telecommuting. People are more productive when they're alone, but they're more collaborative and innovative when they're together. She ended telecommuting. We got to have collaboration, like in Athens in the city, like in London, where it was cramped together. She wanted smart people collaborating. She didn't care about productivity. She wanted the ideas because Yahoo's falling behind. Just about 3 weeks ago, this came across my desk. I get this email from Gallup Business Journal, and they're speaking specifically about her. Can people collaborate effectively while working remotely? And they, of course, Gallup always does studies, and they do a high, big study, and they have looked a lot at employee engagement. That's a hot topic, and they say it's a good proxy for productivity. On the far left is the baseline, no time spent remotely. 28% of the people are engaged, and 20% disengaged. Disengaged means they're like Wally and Dilbert. They walk around with coffee, and they're creative about not working. You've all known people like that, I'm sure. But just telecommuting 1 day a week, up to 20% of their time, notice how the engagement went up to 35% and disengagement down to 12%. And then notice that the band narrows, and if you're more than 50% of the time away from the office, your engagement goes down. So there's evidence then that we need both. We need time alone, and we need time to collaborate. That takes us to the blue filter. The blue represents process. You see the watch on there? You know, the watchmaker makes the watch, gives it to you or sells it to you, and never visits again. You build a perfect machine. My parents are 93 years old. They live up in Windsor, Colorado. In 4 days, they will have been married 71 years. My mother gave my father a watch, a wristwatch, 71 years ago, and it's still working today. The goal of the process is to build that machine that lasts forever, build an organization that lasts forever. Clifton gives the credit for our new economy coming from the smart guys on the West Coast that invented new technology, and he's right. But I would also say Deming's changed the world. You know, he went to Japan after World War II, taught them quality. Some of you with gray hair, like myself, can even remember when Made in Japan was kind of a joke, low quality. Deming said, no, quality, and he used statistical controls and process controls. One of the things he said is, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you are doing. Don't blame the people, blame the process. And then measure, measure, measure with controls. Well, he ended the American century of productivity and the blue light, but this guy started it, Frederick Taylor. Anybody remember Frederick Taylor from management class? The father of scientific management. See, before Taylor, labor was cheap. In most of the history of mankind, a lot of labor is done by slaves or peasants or immigrants. Who cared if they're productive or not? Nobody. You could use them up and replace them. Well, what changed under Taylor is walking around with a stopwatch and say, how long does it take to do this? How do we make more people more productive? And it wasn't by telling them to work harder with a whip. It was with better tools and techniques. Taylor invented the shovels we still use today. Prior to Taylor, a shovel was a shovel. You move dirt, you move coal, you move whatever. Taylor measured how much weight, the materials, how do we do it, and gave shovels that made men with shovels more productive. And according to what I've read, his goal was to have a man go home from work tired but not exhausted, so they come back the next day and work again, and the next day again. And according to Peter Drucker, another great management mind of the 20th century, said on Taylor's scientific management rests, above all, the tremendous surge of affluence of the last 75 years, which has lifted the working masses in the developed countries well above any level recorded before, even for the well-to-do. Scientific management changed the 20th century. How to do things smarter. You don't work harder, you do it smarter. He was the pioneer. Many followed him. One of the greatest scientific management experiments of all time, of all ages, was here at the Hawthorne plant. If you've ever landed at Midway Airport in Chicago and driven north on Cicero, you've seen one of these towers. But in the 1920s, there were 40,000 people working in this plant. And it was a telephone company. The telephone was, to the earliest 20th century, what the internet is today. And according to what I've read, in today's numbers, dollars, their annual output of this factory is $3.7 billion worth of goods. Great place to test scientific management. So they did the famous illumination experiment. I'm sure some of you have heard of it, and the Hawthorne effect, whatever that is. If anybody knows what that is, they're lying because it's so massive. It's amazing. Simple idea. See, factories had windows at that time. What if we brought in electric lights and make the lights brighter? So they took a baseline, measured productivity, knew in foot candles how much light, and they doubled it with electric lights. Productivity went up. Hey, cool. Scientists, let's double it again. They doubled it again. Oh, cool. Productivity went up again. Okay, we got to test it. You got to do the negative test. They brought it down. Productivity, still good. Brought it down some more, still good. They had to bring the lighting down to 0.06 foot candles, moonlight, before productivity went down below baseline. Okay, that's the classic experiment. It ran for 2.5 years, extensive testing. Mid-1920s, I can't remember the years, but I know it was 2.5 years. But the Hawthorne plant was still working in 75 because we still had a telephone company then. And the AT&T director of corporate planning, Henry Bettinger, said the experimenters at the Hawthorne plant did not discover what they set out to find, and the researchers had sense enough to recognize what they had found. A whole new world opened up because of this experiment. That takes us to the red part of my model, the people side. You see, in the plant, it wasn't the building, it was the human beings. Those are people that are putting out the output. And they did experiments. What if we pay people more per piece, or we pay them more of this? What if we have longer work hours, shorter work hours, more breaks, fewer breaks? What if we feed them when they come to work, because a lot of them come hungry? They tried everything. This went on, I think, about 6 years, from the late 20s to the early 30s, testing everything. And according to the testers, they came with one thing that really stuck out. The supervisor's method is the single most important variable. That launched the whole business of management training that most of you have been to if you're in a management job. That's why corporations do management training. There's nothing more important to productivity than the supervisor's method. Now, these are the two guys that ran the human relations part of the Hawthorne study, Elton Mayo, Fitz Rosselsberger. They actually set out to interview all 40,000 workers. And not just a survey like we do today, but trained interviewers that had psychological training, how to open-ended question and shut up and listen, take notes, and put them together. They interviewed 21,000 workers. And they tried to get their hands on what is behind the Hawthorne effect. And that's why I said if somebody tells you what it is, they don't know, because these guys spent 6 years figuring it out. But one of their biggest conclusions is employees are not worker units, but are social beings. I just abhorred the word in project management, resources. I abhorred the word staff. I need people, and I need teams, social teams, that will grab a project and run with it. I'm blessed with one of the best social teams of developers and bright people in my current job, and they get a lot done. Now, that was 100 years ago, right? This is a month ago, Discover Magazine. The teams that took breaks together were 15 to 20% more productive than those with staggered breaks. What? How could that be? Well, the story behind it is Bank of America has call centers. And they noticed that some teams were more productive than others, and they didn't know why. So they studied it, and they couldn't find any difference in training, difference in physical, anything. So they brought in human relations experts and interaction experts, and they noticed little things like this. This is one of many things. But 15 to 20% gain from lunch breaks together. I told this to a fellow that I know that's retired from Hewlett-Packard. He was an electrical engineer. He said, well, Steve, in the 1960s, at 10:30 in the morning, a coffee cart would roll in with free donuts, free coffee, and everybody quit working and go have donuts and coffee. Now, Hewlett-Packard was onto something. Remember, those were the glory days of innovation at Packard. You know, how many of your companies roll in a cart with free donuts and coffee 10:30 every morning so that you can get some better collaboration? Well, you think that's a waste of time. 15 to 20% more productivity? Maybe you should pay attention. So we've looked at people, and we've looked at process. Now, process I'm representing with the empty chair. See, the whole idea of process is about the position, not the person. The bureaucracy was invented because a bureau is a desk, and if you're a bureaucrat, it means you sit behind a desk, and the desk speaks, not you. There could be a different person behind the desk. There could be a different person in the chair next week. That's how corporations are run. We have succession planning, we have training, and it's a good model because you get the smartest person in each chair, and you have a strong corporation. And this was the model of success in the 20th century. It worked. Good people from the Hawthorne study and great processes from Taylor and others. But it doesn't work in the 21st century. See, we have this nasty thing of global competition, global knowledge, and everything is accelerating even faster every day. According to Rod Collins, who wrote a cool book called Wiki Management. Wiki is Hawaiian for fast, and in Hawaiian, wiki is really fast. Well, he says nobody is smarter than everybody, and nobody's faster than everybody. He cites studies where a company can't solve a problem. Hey, let's put it on the internet. Let's have a contest. Problem solved within days with creative answers that blew companies away. Nobody is smarter than everybody. So that takes us down to this. Rod Collins says, get rid of the hierarchy. It's a remnant of the 1900s. Because nobody is smarter than everybody. The smartest person in the chair, let's pretend this fella looks real smart sitting up here in a coat and tie, and no tie, he's got a white shirt, so you know he's smart. Let's say he's the smartest guy in the room. But he can't hold a candle to the collective intelligence of this room. Now try to hold a candle to the collective intelligence of the world. Get rid of the hierarchy. It's dead. Forget it. Hey, this looks a lot like college, doesn't it? Party hard, work hard. Remember that? Wasn't that fun? You want to do that instead of go to work tomorrow? Let's go back to college. Well, here's the problem. You see, if I want to get paid, somebody's got to pay me. Nobody's going to pay me to have fun. The board of directors reports to the stockholders. This is serious business. Okay, forget this people stuff. This is serious business in the 21st century. We've got to work hard, we've got to collaborate, and we've got to report to the board. And there's no time to go to conferences. There's no time to go out with your friends. There's no time for lunch. There's no time for breaks. That's what we're building. Oh, but you want that 15 to 20% productivity growth? Maybe there is time. What I propose is you turn on all the lights. And I propose that it's a blending of the colors. It's a huge mistake to live in one color. And if you can't do the other things, you can't do the people thing, get somebody that can. We're going to do a little experiment. This is a real fun one. We're going to write 2 words on a piece of paper. There are some cards on your desk. There's a shiny side and a dull side. You can write on the dull side. And you're going to write 2 really important words. There's pencils on your paper. And there's pads if you can't find the card. When you found your paper and your pencil, please hold your pencil or pen up in the air so I can see. That's when I know you're ready, because these 2 words are important. Now, would you look at which hand you're holding your pencil in? If it's in your right hand, please move it to your left hand. Would you please? Everybody got on the left hand? Now, the 2 words you're going to write down, you all know what they are, your first name and your last name with your left hand. Please do it. Some of you are really slow. Wow, they're still going. How could this be? You don't know your name? You can't spell it? Had to look it up? Now, what if I were to tell you we have done an extensive study at several highly successful companies, and we noticed a disproportional number of people writing with their left hands? How many of you think best practice should be write with your left hand? Put your hand up. Best practice, right? Oh, not very many of you. How many think that's a bad idea? Okay, most of you. You know, who am I to tell you which hand to write with? But you know we do it to people all the time. We tell them about best practices, right? How many of you love best practices? That's like telling somebody to write left-handed because at some company somewhere it worked. So it must work here too, and if you can't do it, you're stupid and you're slow. We do that to people. This is a real-life story. I'm not making this up. Okay, here's a highly successful company. You've heard of General Electric. You've heard of Jack Welch. Back in about 2007, I think this came out. It was the last page in Discover magazine. It caught my attention. It talked about Six Sigma. Remember Deming and quality? We needed quality in the 1990s, right? And General Electric went in a whole, how many of you use Six Sigma? Anybody? Oh, great. Okay. What Welch says, Six Sigma is all that matters. You can't get promoted or get a raise or stock options unless you go all the way into Six Sigma. And General Electric did, and it worked. Next week, cover story of Business Week. The very next week, this was the last thing, here's the cover. 3M's innovation crisis, how Six Sigma almost smothered its idea culture. They installed Six Sigma at 3M and they killed ideas. They said process excellence demands precision, consistency, and repetition. Innovation calls for variation, failure, and serendipity. That's that blue and that green thing we were talking about, chaos and order. You need both. And they killed innovation at 3M, the most innovative company. Next week, oh, I was loving this series. Very next week, Tom Peters writes a letter to the editor, lots of good letters. Tom Peters said, he wrote In Search of Excellence, the greatest best practice book ever written. And Tom Peters says, I, for one, have staked my own legacy on decentralization and innovation, railed against ISO 9000, Six Sigma, benchmarking, and best practices for 20 plus years. You see, Tom realized In Search of Excellence was wrong. He had 6 things you got to do to be excellent. Or, I think it was 6. And then he wrote the next book, Thriving on Chaos. 1,000 things you might do that might work. Because this is how real companies get ahead. They try everything until something works. And then they keep trying more things. Okay, well, that was 2007. It couldn't apply anymore, could it? Well, here we are. This is the man, Jeff Nicholson, invented Post-it notes. Before he invented Post-it notes, there were no Post-it notes, no yellow stickies. Here's what he said. This is coming from the horse's mouth. The Six Sigma process killed innovation at 3M. Initially, what would happen at 3M with Six Sigma people, they would say they need a 5-year business plan for a new idea. Come on. We don't know yet because we don't know how it works. We don't know how many customers will take it up. We haven't taken it out to the customer yet. This is the most anti-Six Sigma man in existence. And he ought to know. He invented Post-it notes from a company that invented Scotch tape and masking tape and magic tape and a host of other products that we all use in our daily lives. So what I want to say is there's nothing wrong with Six Sigma, but it's not the right answer all the time. There's nothing wrong with writing with your left hand, those of you left-handed, right? But it's not right for everybody. So now we come in and we want to look at what do we do with this information. You see, it'd be wrong for me to come here and say why you have to do this and not tell you how to do it. Our keynote speaker this morning, Chris Philandro, gave us some tools. Remember, he had a little tool guy at the end there? And I wrote this down. He wrote down 3 easy things. Always consult with others. Oh, that sounds collaboration. Measure yourself. Oh, sounds process, doesn't it? And solicit feedback, especially from your critics. That's that people thing. You know those people that I can't stand? Maybe they have something to offer. Well, I want to offer a proposal with 3 ideas. You won't find these in any book. I made them up with Jim Reardon and other collaborators. But they're based on historical events and based on things we've read. So I think they might be true. And you might want to write these down because they're not even in my book. Because this came out just a few weeks ago that we came up with this. 1 is show respect. 2 is get feedback. And number 3, and most important, is get engaged. You notice I didn't say passively make your employees be engaged. I said get engaged. Now let's put this through the lights. Under the blue light, show respect. Respect the position. Remember those empty chairs? You respect the chair, not the person. The position, not the person. What do you do when your boss tells you to do something, unless it's illegal or unethical? What do? You do it. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am, right? If you don't do that, you get fired. Okay, what do you do when the customer has a complaint? The customer, that's a position. You do something about it. What do you do when a peer needs help? The peer. You do something about it. And you got to be on top of respect. You got to show respect. Number 2, which is very different, respect everyone equally. This is where you respect the person, not the position. Well, these are kind of in opposition, aren't they? Do I respect the person? Do I respect the position? Well, it's both. Now you all know that. This is the American way. We learned that in the 20th century, right? Anybody have trouble doing this? Respecting people and respecting position? No, you all survived. But what's different in the 21st century? You know already the green. Respect individuality. This is the libertarian wing of management. Have you ever heard, if we do it for you, we got to do it for everybody? Let me say it. If we do it for you, we got to do it for everybody. Have you ever heard that? That is stupid. What about you got Aristotle working for you? And Aristotle doesn't feel like doing it your way. Are you going to say, we do it for you, Aristotle, we got to do it for everybody? You have Aristotles working at your place right now. You got bright people. Are you shutting them down with dumb rules that apply to everybody? We have no trouble giving the people in the hierarchy special privilege. Do we give special privilege to the highly ingenious people? Libertarian rules, socialism rules, and conservative business practices rule. All three, and it comes together in the center. Do you do all three at the same time? Absolutely. You think it through before you talk. Am I respecting the position? Am I respecting the person? And am I respecting the individual? Very different things. Okay, that was rule 1, respect. Rule 2, get feedback. Deming would say measure everything. Six Sigma would say measure everything. I used to own a training company. Actually, I was a partner, had a 50% partner. We did training at corporations in project management across the country at large corporations. And we get together on Fridays, Bill and I. We play golf. That's a good way to end the week and talk about how the business is doing. And I enjoy getting out in the sunshine. I live in Denver, and the sun's usually shining and year-round. But I never kept score. And Bill kept saying, Steve, if you don't keep score, you're not going to get better. Now, I told Bill I'm not going to get better. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But Bill did get better because he did keep score. In the blue, measure everything. It's important. Then the red, listen with empathy. Forget the measurements. Forget the accountability. Ask people how they feel. Now, I have a really, really hard time with this empathy thing. And I'm sure a lot of you do too, because you're in technology and we'd rather play with computers than with people. You know how that is. And I remember taking a class in interaction management a number of years ago. And the instructor made us do a role play. You ever do role plays in a class? You know, don't you hate that? And everybody's watching. I see you shaking your head, yeah. I always failed miserably when she said, Steve, your empathy score is really, really low. I thought I was being nice. What is the problem? So then I started watching the people that got a high empathy score. You know what they said when somebody said something? Oh, wow, cool. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. What does it express? A lot. Let's try it together. You could try this at home, and it works. I'm going to say something and say oh. Don't say anything but oh, but see how you inflect the oh. We had a dog. She got old, and we had to put her down. You got it? Was that hard? Now, what if you were to say, well, you know, dogs get old. They live in 7 years for every year of you, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. How would I feel? Terrible. When you said, oh, you expressed empathy. Oh. Some of you even hate dogs, but you can still say, oh, because it bothered me and my wife because of the poor dog. Well, here's another one. We got a new puppy, and that thing is full of energy. See, it works. You can try this at home. You can't say oh wrong. It can't be done. When you don't know what to say oh. And I started watching. It works with your spouse. I absolutely guarantee it. And if I would do it more often, I would do much better with my spouse than I do. Because what do? I solve the problem. When I should say, oh. Or, oh, oh, oh. It really works. So try it at home. So you got the feedback thing. The feedback is empathy and the word oh. And another real-life example that happened to me, this is about 5 years ago. I was out in California teaching a class, and I got an email from my sister, just a couple years older than me, and it said she had a brain tumor and had to have an operation. What do you say? How do you reply? What do you do? I wrote one word on the email and replied. I wrote, wow. That expressed empathy, and I had nothing more to say. And any attempt to say anything wasn't going to help. Use that. And don't say dumb things. Just say, oh, or wow. It works. That's the respond with empathy. Okay, so I think everybody gets that intellectually, right? The people thing, the process thing. The hard thing is always the green one. Yeah, at least that's my observation. Wait and see. What kind of feedback is wait and see? Well, how long does it take to solve a problem? How long does it take to solve a problem? Until it's done. How long will that be? Okay, this is a real-life example. I was in a project meeting 2 weeks ago. The project manager asked for the normal report, and the developer said, well, I'm behind. And she says, well, when are you going to catch up? He said, I don't know. I hit a stumbling block. I can't get past it. It's a technical problem. Well, a week, 2 weeks? What? And the developer looks there and said, I don't know. If I knew, I would have solved it already. I don't know is a powerful word, isn't it? Wait and see is a powerful thing. Well, she backed off. Within a few days, the problem was solved, and he was back on schedule. That's how innovation happens. We don't know. So then the most important thing, get engaged. Everybody wants to make a meaningful contribution in some way. Nobody wants meaningless work. Remember going all the way to Clifton saying people want good jobs. They don't want meaningless jobs. Well, how do you get engaged? How do you make your job meaningful? Well, the same developer that I was just telling you about, his name is Bill. That's his real name, but you don't know his last name. Spoke up, and I was telling him about this. And he says, well, when I was first learning the business, I didn't know a lot. And I decided I was going to study at night. And I was really going to get good at technology. He got engaged, and it paid. If you're a manager, you want to give people meaningful work. The worst thing you can do is to not delegate meaningful work, because you're depriving people of meaningful work. And this is where you pay for performance. This is where you have your objectives, management by objectives. This is all blue stuff, and it's good stuff. But it's not the only stuff. The other part is feel valued. You know, you can pay me for a performance, and I can do well, and I'm engaged, but if nobody notices, am I going to stay engaged? Oh, I'll just go play with the kids or something, you know. I'm not going to stay late. Nobody cares. You ever felt that way? What does it take to make somebody feel valued? Not money. What? Tell them, yeah. With emotion. Wow, that's really good. Cool. You know, that's how you feel valued. Cool. Not, well, that's pretty good, but you know, you could have done better. No, that's blue. Red is, that is really cool. I bet you could do even more. Go for it. That's feeling valued. Okay, we all get this, you know, this 20th century stuff. Nothing new about that, right? It's just a gentle reminder. But here's the hard one again. Empowered. Do we empower our people, or do we micromanage them? If you don't empower, you get disengagement. If you want to tell me how to do my job and tell me you must use best practices, you must use your left hand, you must do this, and here's this rule, and you must do that, that's how you get disengaged people. Now, how do you get engaged people? You let them do it their way. That's not that hard. And the brighter they are and the more capable they are, the more you need to disengage yourself so they can become more engaged. Now, that's common sense, but is it common practice? We want to be able to do things our way. And you have to earn that, of course. Blanchard, in his model of willing and able and willing and all that kind of stuff, the ending point is the person is willing and able. You leave them alone, they become empowered. That's where maximum engagement is. Again, it's a sweet spot. I didn't say don't do work, the meaningful contribution. I didn't say don't do valued, but empower people and don't disempower. So that takes me to the end. This is about turning on all the lights, the red, green, and blue. And whatever you're weak at, you got to figure out what to do about it. It's about process. Remember those chairs? They're important. It's about people. Remember that coffee break? It's important. And it's about a concentration of smart people working together. You need a lot of smart people concentrated, collaborating, if you want to turn on the lights.